Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I've done my quota runs and managed to get lower than 8 cost full star knights of this current Anomaly Arbitration. And it was quite easily the most miserable Anomaly Arbitration I've ever experienced. And I guess we're gonna talk about it. I'm not even going to say it's the worst because I'm pretty sure it's only going to get worse, and this is just the worst so far. I'm just going to put out this reminder here for everyone. At this point, it's more of a reminder to myself to prevent my blood from boiling over. Anomaly Arbitration is optional content and has no tangible Jade rewards. If you were baited into pulling for it, please don't pull the trigger and start skipping characters you like and pulling characters you dislike. For me, I'm still running characters and teams I actually like playing, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to clear with it. I'm very lucky meta-wise, to be honest. But for some people, the combinations of characters they like and can tolerate just isn't good meta-wise, so don't feel bad if you can't clear this. This is really painful. With that out of the way, let's take a look at this Anom arbitration cycle. You can look at this as a guide, so if you're having some problems, I may have some tips for you to be able to clear it faster, but don't expect much, especially for the night stages. After this Anomaly Arbitration, I hope that people arguing power creep isn't that bad finally see the evidence in front of their eyes that even if they release a balanced character like Ashvale, it only gets worse for the player base. I can't even go in order of easiest to hardest because all of them are equally terrible in their own way. So for the first time in this channel, I'm just going to go in order of this Nightmare Blunt rotation. On the first stage, you have the full course of Elation Shilling enemies and 2 new enemies that really should have stayed in the vault. The old enemies are the Schoolgirls, which have innate damage reduction until you deal ELA damage or gain enough punchline, and the Rocker Chicken, which just hits hard, speeds up other enemies, and has no real counter without an actual Elation character. As for the new enemies, you have the reskinned TV enemies that are somehow worse than the actual TV enemies. When you hit them for the first time, your team gains punchline and they randomly do one of 3 things. They either increase their own attack, they advance the other enemies, or they apply strong reverberation to other enemies, which is a crowd control that blocks only their next turn. Yes, this is truly random, like there's no joke here. You can't really rig a result or guarantee it from my experience. Then you have this Transformers looking dude who has really high quantum res. The exact number is 80% quantum res apparently, which is just ridiculous. And they are very scary. On their first turn, they do a single target attack, and then they do a huge blast attack that deals a lot of damage. And on their second turn, they enter a phase where they are unbreakable and can't be crowd controlled. And you have to hit them 7 times to disperse it. During this phase, they do a lot of single target damage, and if you hit them with quantum type attacks specifically, they gain an immediate action. Once you do this mechanic, their vulnerability increases by 30%, and quantum res is reduced by 40%. You really don't want this enemy to live for long though, mostly because there's too many waves of enemies that if you fail to kill this boss before this phase, your run is already kinda cooked damage-wise. Because yes, as you can see, there's 6 of the TV reskins, 2 of these Transformers, 6 of the Schoolgirls, and 2 of the Rocker Chicken. It's very Pure Fiction-esque, but the HP is actually pretty high in practice. Because if you're not running Elation, those Elation shill mechanics that the Rocker Chicken and the Schoolgirls have get a lot more annoying. Thanks to the TV reskins giving an aha instant to non-Elation teams, the Schoolgirls aren't as much of a problem, but the chicken is still annoying. The debuff is Confinement, which is a mercy compared to anything else this Anom has to offer. It's pretty negligible. This fight sucks pretty bad. The HP doesn't seem that high until you realize that they have mechanics to cover it up and are pretty dangerous if the fight lasts long enough. In my experience, my successful DOT team involve the E1 packages of DOT for a 6 cost. Does enough damage to where the enemies die before their big nuke that I can run someone like, let's say, Gallagher. But if you remove Black Swan or Kafka's E1, the fight would last long enough where Gallagher simply isn't enough sustain, and because Danheng, Permancer Terai, and Hyacine have a lot of bigger fish to fry in the other knights, the other alternatives are either Lingsha and Huohuo, who have equally questionable sustain, and SP issues, or Aventurine who doesn't provide much damage to DOT at all. This is a pretty feast or famine stage because of that. Break has a really good matchup against it, but from what I've seen without Eidolons on Firefly or Dahlia, the enemies survive long enough for sustaining to be an actual problem. And because of that, you can't run a third support, and you lose a lot of damage that you might 3-cycle even if you do survive, which is very unlikely. I got really close with a 4-cost Lingsha clear with Fugue E0S0, Dahlia E0S1, and Harmony MC. And I would have got it if I just had Dahlia's E2, so a 6 cost maybe with Lingsha main DPS. Castris with high enough investment can actually get over the Quantum Res, but if you were gonna run Castris at all in this Anom, there's better Knight stages for that. Same with Evernight and even Finon. Ashvale is okay, I guess, but Sustainless with him is tough because he's made of paper, so you might have to use high invested supports on him that will hurt your other teams on these Knights. Same with Anoxa and Archer, it's just not very fun with the male characters this time around. Bootel also isn't that good. If Firefly is having trouble with this without Eidolons, Bootel is in a much worse shape obviously. And the obvious best option for this fight is Arxie, because this is the full course meal of Elation Chill. That is just so fun, right? The best advice I could give is to try and time the free AHA attack with the schoolgirls, but there really isn't any countermeasures to everything else like the TV RNG, so unfortunately, I can't help you any more here than just giving some teams. Then we have Night 2. I thought it couldn't get worse for Mono Rem shilling after their era has passed, but this is worse than any Mono Rem shill stage so far, and it's not even close. First, this has depowered. Just a very annoying debuff that conveniently only one team in the game actively ignores it. Then, it has Taunting Plus, which, depending on if you have a specific sustain or not, means either a good thing or these enemies will string you up if you press buttons at the wrong time. Then you have these enemies, 2 massive sustain checks, one of which only specifies healing, and one that is a huge damage check and becomes a sustain check without enough damage. I don't know what to tell you if you don't have Hyacine, because without her, this fight is insanely stressful. Not only is the healer check really high, but the damage check is also really high. Meaning, Danheng Permancer Terai as a shield unit obviously doesn't cut it for this stage because he's a shielder. So if you're just going to run a healer, the best you got are healers that are much worse at sustaining and a lot worse at contributing damage. You either pick Lingsha, Gallagher, or Huohuo. Take your pick. And when your pick is either of those 3, the boss has taunting and can just sneak up on you, where these sustains just do not have updated kits to deal with this aggression without resetting a lot for hit and energy RNG. Oh, and the energy debuff doesn't help because these other healers that are not Hyacine rely a lot on their ultimate for emergencies that you might just die to the opening attacks. So in this stage, you have a triple threat of the worst possible things that could happen. You have really bad debuffs that cut down options, the worst sustain check enemies in the game which cuts down options, and the fight has high enough HP where running a team with a sustain that isn't the specific one it likes is going to suck without a lot of investment. It's kinda startling that Pollux being an AV lock doesn't seem to be that much of an issue when the debuff makes it so that anyone that isn't Hyacine has to pull their hair out managing their healing. There's no point in talking about the best teams for this stage. It all boils down to either use Hyacine or have other healers that have much worse damage and sustain that their other teammates have to make up for it with Eidolons. So just to give a rundown here of what exists, Mighty if you have Hyacine and Cyrene is good, Castris and Evernight always wants Hyacine anyway, DOT can use Gallagher if you've invested enough into their insanely strong E1s, Firefly with E2 can use Gallagher, Finon with E2 and Cyrene E2 can sustainless, Archer with Hyacine, Anoxa with Hyacine, Jingli with Hyacine, Hyacine as a main DPS, you get the point. Just run Hyacine or a team with high enough investment with much worse alternatives. I can't really give you any good advice because it doesn't matter how much you play around this. If you don't have enough investment, or the one specific unit called Hyacine, I can't help you. This fight sucks, use Hyacine here, if not, eat the 2-star for your own sanity. Let's move on. The last of this Nightmare Blunt rotation is a bunch of Black Tide enemies that are really squishy, and the second wave is Lygus. The HP doesn't seem that bad, but oh no, what's jumping out of the sky? It's the interference debuff. And if you've already fought Black Tide enemies and Lygus, you know how many times these enemies hit and how much worse it could get exponentially when fighting Lygus long enough. This fight was already feast or famine enough because of the ult RNG from Lygus and the Black Tide spawning mechanic, but now that you have interference, the sustain check is pretty bad, and the damage check gets worse the longer you play it. So, you need to cross specific damage requirements, and I can tell you what they are. If you are able to one-shot the small fish on wave 1, you should be able to do enough damage to clear Lygus without much help from the RNG ult activation, and maybe you can even zero cycle, if you have a good enough matchup. If you can one-shot the war armor enemies on the first wave, you may have a chance of 2-cycling Lygus with enough ult RNG. Check if your DPSs can do these damage thresholds first, because otherwise wave 2 will not be any better if aiming for a 3-star. The reason why you want to one-shot is because if the enemies live long enough, that means they will retaliate with a delay and screw you over really badly and inflate your cycle count. Once you're in wave 2, depending on the amount of damage you did with different teams, it can be pretty simple. For DOT, if wave 1 went by without even getting hit at all, you can focus all of your attacks on Xandar and get a 0 cycle. For Phynon, since he's immune to delay, he can abuse the Lygus energy mechanic to maintain Kazlana and clear full stars even without Eidolons. Phynon is one of the few units that can actually sustainless this very consistently. For Evernight, since she speeds up the phase switch, she deals with Lygus faster, but if you were getting hit a lot in wave 1, it will still come down to RNG with Lygus's ult. For everyone else, they have to be pretty straight-laced and follow the gimmick. If your Anoxa fails to kill an entire wave of Black Tide enemies in wave 1 with his double skill, it is a sign you will struggle in wave 2, but it's not impossible. If you're using Archer, if he can't one-shot the fish with his full stack arrow directly after spawning, but you're close enough to kill with Daniel's dragon, you're gonna rely on ult RNG from Lygus. If you're using Ash Veil, if he can clear out 4 enemies in wave 1 with 1 ult use, and the enemy's not hitting him twice, he should be just fine in wave 2. This usually means a Tribi Eidolon or something. Same goes for Herta. If her ult can't clear out 4 Black Tide enemies by itself, and has to rely on her E skill on top of that, wave 2 can be a huge problem for her. Again, this is a feast or famine stage, because if you leave small enemies alive, they will hit you and the damage requirement gets a lot worse. Being capable of doing one-shots in this stage will do you a massive favor, and to save your sanity from trying with a team, I recommend doing damage tests on wave 1 to see if you can really do it before bashing your head in with a certain team. A helpful tip for wave 2 if you're using single target units like Archer and Ash Veil is to crowd control the enemy that has the axe when Lygus is in his phase with the Black Tide creatures. Otherwise, the axe enemies will advance themselves when you kill an enemy and then retaliate with an AoE attack, which is a delay. If you kill the axe enemy, a new one spawns in its place. But if you only CC the axe guy and go after the other mobs, new axe enemies won't spawn at all, which could be helpful. Overall, you could still get screwed over by RNG, like Lygus just deciding to use it on PT instead of your DPS, and sometimes runs are really lucky and get the right combo each time that they cannot replicate. But if you know your damage is reliable through testing it out on wave 1, then wave 2 is just a matter of resetting enough times. I used Archer for my clear, had to pull Ash Veil Sig for him since the boat LC wasn't enough, and I still needed to retry a lot to get a recording because I failed the wave 1 test and had to get the right Lygus RNG. This fight is pretty technical, but the damage check is still pretty high, that you might have the team that can clear it, but you just don't know how to optimize it just yet or get the right RNG. Just like all of the other knights, this knight also sucks. Mono Ram technically is the best team, but Knight 2 kinda steals Hyacine away from them. The most consistent and best option is Phynon by far. He simply abuses every mechanic Lygus throws at you, and the debuff does not matter on him whatsoever. Finon's one of the only safe sustainless units for this stage and clears it at fairly low cost even without Eidolons once you know his rotation. This is Finon's best matchup by far. You can try Ashvale, Anoxa, and Archer, but without heavy relic investment and Eidolons on supports and maybe themselves, it is very technical to try and full star with them, but it is possible. Herta and DOT do have good matchups too, but Herta in general is much weaker now, so you'll probably need Eidolons on Trivi or something. Now that we've gone through 3 of the worst night stages in HSR so far, let's talk about the King stage. Actually, I'm not gonna talk much about the King stage at all. This is the part of the script where I got too lazy because there really isn't anything to talk about this. The only thing you need to know is if you're able to 0 cycle any of the night stages, you most likely 3-star this and maybe even 0 cycle it. If you can only 2 cycle one of the night stages at most, a 2-star is almost effortless for you. I really don't know what the mechanics of this bosses are, I just kind of fell asleep with DOT. Like, I paid more attention to my Night 1 DOT clear than the King stage, if that gives you any indication of how easy this is. And in my free-to-play account with my European account, I managed to 2-star this with Evernight. Meanwhile, I 2-cycled Night 2, so it's like, what is even happening anymore? I don't know, man. Yeah, this is like the most obnoxious case of coughing baby king and nuclear knights I've ever seen. Like, straight up, I don't even know what to tell you about the mechanics because if you've cleared the night stages, you will fall asleep clearing with this one, I guarantee it. At least you get a free reroll dice though, but even 5-starring these nights are probably pretty difficult either way, so... So that's it for the Anomaly Arbitration on this cycle. So how bad is it, really? Individually, these night stages are really bad, but together they stretch your account to its absolute limit. None of these night stages are very generous to sustainless, so the damage check is much higher than normal and you actually need 3 really good teams. The debuffs also really cut down team comp options. I really don't want to hear people using my clears as like evidence that, oh, even without shield you still cleared it, power creep isn't that bad. Let me remind you that this is my paid account where I have the mem hat, and I have E0 of plenty of good units and E1s of the best E1 units in the game. My free-to-play accounts are completely stuck at 6-starring the knights and aren't able to do anything about it. I can't even pull on a banner to make it easier right now. Ashvale isn't any easier to clear with than the options that I already have, and I already own Hyacine. My problems aren't with her team, it's in the other teams. And Boothill's rerun is a punch in the gut knowing he won't make things any easier for you in this Anomaly Arbitration. So no, the balancing team just doesn't give a fuck. And if you talk to anyone that's actually done low costs or low cycles of this Anom, it's very bad. Unless you just follow the company line and get E0 of every shield archetype like Elation or Mono Rem, you need Eidolons because this is terrible to clear with. This is bad balancing, and it's only gonna get worse. Do not defend this. At least the good part about this is even if you're baited into pulling a banner, the banner doesn't really help you except for Hyacine. Except for Hyacine, the banners don't really help you in clearing any faster, so you just don't pull. Hopefully. If you pull, not caring about balance or the power of a unit, by the way, that's fine, but do not say that the balancing in HSR is good, because it's in your face now that it clearly isn't. We had like 2 patches of somewhat decent balancing, then this one just snuck in to wake everyone up. I envy you if you don't care about balancing in HSR, because this is miserable to talk about. Thankfully, I still like other parts of the game that I'm not quitting, so now I'm kinda left with these final words for this Anomaly Arbitration. The easiest way to play HSR is to not care about the meta and enjoy everything else. My tip for Anomaly Arbitration, and even the lower endgame modes, is to just don't do it at all. With the rate that we're going, even minimum Jade requirements on the other endgame modes are becoming more miserable to clear, especially if you look at 4.2 leaks. You'll miss out on 3 pulls if you don't clear endgame versus 180 pulls you could have gotten for a character you actually like. Do not wallow into despair and simply disengage and be immune to rage if you really hate this. I am someone that decided to chase self-inflicted punishment as a masochistic endgame player. If you don't want this special type of pain, I envy you. Anyway, that's all for now. I'm tired of talking about this and I'm tired of recording so many of this, so I'll see you. I will be making an Anom piloting stream so I can help everyone out instead of making videos. Is that acceptable? Anyway, bye guys. Bye.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.